like you've just heard like the greatest theme music ever written for a podcast? Because I have not actually done it yet. Yes, I will. This is the beginning of it. Here we go. All right, so welcome. This is the first episode, the pilot inaugural episode, I suppose, of a brand new podcast, The Scorekeepers. This is a music arts podcast. We talk about everything related to music and sort of how it cross-pollinates with all sorts of different areas of arts. This episode's going to be about film music, and I'm joined by two fabulous film composers from my that face from my graduate program here at NYU. So, I should probably introduce myself too, or do you think I should do that?
I'm your host, Daniel Farrell.
I am your host, Daniel Farrell. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. So, to my left,
I'm Caleb Burnett, a film composer, musician, singer, cinephile. Sorry. I'm a part of Daniel's graduate program, like he was saying. Just an all-around lover of film music. So, and to my left,
is that really how we're gonna do it?
apparently it's a thing.
Across the table. My name is Dallin Burns. I am also a composer, producer, arranger. You can find out about me at DallinBurns.com.
I will be plugging your stuff.
that's for the end.
You definitely look like you're reading off the notes there, as if you needed help remembering like who you were.
What do I do again?
All right, so like I said, this episode's going to be focused on film music, and that's why I brought you guys in. The focus of it's going to be on memorability of film music. What makes film music memorable? And sort of this topic came to me. I had the fortune of going to the Atlantic Music Festival this summer, which is a classical musical festival up in Waterville, Maine. And we had a guest composer named David Ludwig. He gave a presentation. Instead of presenting on his own music and, you know, how lots of these guest composers are and they talk about their stuff, he actually had us do this very interesting exercise. And he had like 6 or so students over 2 days present like 10 minutes. They introduced themselves and then showed like 6-7 minutes of a piece that they had. And half the class could look at the score that was being projected and half the class couldn't. We had to look away or close our eyes or something like that. And the question after the showing of the music was, what did we remember from all of that? And he always asks the non-score section people first. And it was very interesting to see what people actually remembered. And obviously, we're a room full of composers and musicians, so our ears were, you know, on overdrive the whole time. But it was very interesting to see what people actually remembered and how that differed from some of the people who had the score in front of them, you know?
Was it concert music?
It was all concert music,
Okay.
yes. So obviously a little bit different than film music. But sort of had me thinking because film music is pretty much universally enjoyed without a score. I mean, as you guys know from trying to do academic papers, finding scores for film music is nigh impossible, unless it's like a concert arrangement or something like that, like John Williams. So sort of I wanted to talk about how inherently in our art we view it without a score. And there's so much that's important, I suppose, about film music that you have to remember it in some capacity in the film, I think, for it to be effective. I mean, we're getting maybe ahead of ourselves here.
Slow down.
Yeah, slow down the train. So yeah, I wanted to start this discussion with what makes a film score memorable? Just this general question. I think it's very helpful, us being film composers, to talk about this. Whoever ends up listening to this, maybe five of them that are going to listen to this may find this useful. All right, so yeah, I want to take a stab at it. What do you guys think makes a film score a memorable film score?
So I was thinking about this when you asked us if we wanted to talk about this, and you were just saying that, you know, when you listen to concert music, a lot of times you have a score that you can access. Even if you're not looking at it while you're listening to it, you can access it later. But when you're watching a film, it's almost like the film is the score, the companion to the music. And so my first thought on what makes a score memorable is like how well it works with the film. Because if you listen to a film cue later, most of the time that scene is going to pop into your head while you're listening to it. And if the music doesn't work that well, maybe not.
So for you, a memorable film score makes you think of the scene that it's from immediately. Is that what you're kind of
Yeah, but it doesn't do that unless it works with unless the music works with the scene.
So you don't think that there could be a film that has potentially a really good soundtrack, maybe is not so great of a film, and you don't think that people would remember the soundtrack?
Well, what I'm saying is that's just one thing that can make the score memorable.
Okay.
So,
Way to make us talk in absolutes, Sith Lord.
Yes. The Sith only deal in absolutes here on this podcast.
See, for me, memorability really comes from the melody. And like I have a playlist on my Spotify of all my favorite scores, and if you listen through it, it's like they're all the most melodic moments of a movie. And how, like you were saying, the music will help you remember a scores. For me, sometimes it's the opposite, where if I'm watching a movie, I get excited because I know a cue or a theme is coming up because I listen to it so much outside of the movie. I kind of do it
I think that may be a little cheating.
I know, right?
I think that's a little cheating.
If it's good music, you listen to it when you want, as often as you want.
well,
I'm not saying you're wrong.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no,
saying I think I consume it a little bit differently.
I'm piggybacking on you to say that there is a lot to that discussion as well. Like, for a melody to be memorable, it has to be, you could argue that it needs to be slightly easy to remember. Common intervals, common rhythms. I mean, the Force theme is not complicated.
Mm-hmm. Just that perfect fifth, baby.
I mean, exactly. Like, that's why, I think that's why, like, people who aren't musicians or film connoisseurs, whatever you want to say, can remember things like the Force theme.
Interesting. Well, it was funny that at the festival when we had this exercise, I think melody might have been the thing that people remembered least. I think melody is kind of a very short-term memory kind of thing. Sometimes a lot of film.
But continue.
Sometimes I feel like people will remember it maybe 5 minutes out of the theater, but then, after a long span of it, they might not. They may remember, oh, this film had a great melody, but they don't remember what that melody is. One of the areas of music composition, I guess you could say, musical ideas, that sort of stuck with people long after the fact, I think, in that discussion, is sort of textures, just very general terms in terms of textures in film scoring, that we can remember texture sometimes, Yeah. What do you guys feel about that?
I was thinking today, like, this whole question of the memorability of film scores, like, probably has a different answer depending on, like, what era you're in or what era you're living in. Now, as we're headed more towards texture, like, most people will remember Hans Zimmer scores, texture, those types of scores, not just Hans Zimmer, but that's just who comes to mind. But, like, 70s, 80s, 90s films, that's not what film scoring was. You remember the Back to the Future theme or the Star Wars theme or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, what do you define as texture? Just as a follow-up question to
That's
you,
a good
because
question.
for me, like, texture can be. Are we talking instrumentation? Are we talking?
I think instrumentation is a part of it. I think probably harmony is probably a little bit
are
of
we
a part of it.
talking production and mixing as well? Like those effects on music?
Maybe, perhaps. Obviously, that's not really, that we never really ever talked about production, obviously, at the festival, because this is all concert music, and,
Sure.
the recording is the recording. It's a live
Yeah,
recording, But that's obviously something that's so inherently important in film music. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it falls into texture. I'm assuming, I think you could easily make the argument that it does. Then just hold this whole sound design world as well. But yeah, I think texture is a pretty general term, and I think that's why people like to use it so much, because it's so widely encompassing.
Yeah, maybe a term to associate with that whole conversation is like the atmosphere.
See, for me, I'd say atmosphere versus texture, because when you say texture, I think like specific sounds and combinations of sounds, like something that is very, what's the word, visceral, for lack of a better word.
Like objective, I guess you could say.
Whereas if you say atmosphere,
That has
I'm
almost
suddenly thinking just like an electronic pad. Like I wouldn't say an electronic
To
sustained
me,
pad
like
would be
atmosphere
different than
almost
texture.
implies a sort of emotional aspect to it.
Well,
Maybe a little bit. I don't know.
think there are
That's
two
just kinda-
definitions for that word, but like
Word.
Welcome to the Semantics Podcast. where we just talk about the
Hey, you
etymology
invited
of
us.
words.
speaking from my mind, like when I was saying atmosphere, I just meant like the environment that the music creates.
Yeah, this sort of sound world, I
Yeah.
suppose. Yeah. So do you think that there's films nowadays? I mean, we're not going to... You can name a couple specific films, perhaps, that you think have really memorable textures.
From this year.
It doesn't have to be this year, just in general. Movies, because obviously melody, I think, is pretty easy to name movies that have really memorable melodies.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're the big ones,
If
like
we're
you said, Star
talking,
Wars.
We're talking musical texture or sound design texture?
Either, I think.
Well, I didn't like the film, but Dunkirk, obviously.
That's a great
comes to
example, yeah.
mind.
I haven't seen that one, actually.
It's a good film. But
We're kicking him out of the room as we speak.
I disliked the sound texture of that movie. But anyway, that's an example of the use
Very memorable
memorable
texture with
use
the
of
ticking
that.
clocks and stuff like that.
Same composer, same director, but the Nolan Batman films as well come to mind for me.
See, I'd say the Batman films are a lot more melodic than... Because I've listened to the score from... What's it called, though? You told me that's cheating. Texture, I would say Annihilation really has stuck out.
That has a... Yeah,
I
it's
definitely
a
agree
good
with that.
example.
For me, like, that's my definition of a score that's like a textural score, because I do so much.
And to me, that film... There was often times where I was like, is this sound design? Is this score?
Or is it score? Yeah.
But it was definitely a memorable texture.
Yeah,
same with
regardless.
Dunkirk.
Yeah.
His score
Is
is
this score sound design? So maybe, I guess, in film music, obviously musical textures, right, in terms of like instrumentation and stuff like that. But I think film music, really that like sound design thing, like you guys have been mentioning, I think that plays an important role. And I think people remember that as well as melody. Maybe, I don't know.
That weird little vibrating pseudo horn synth noise that happens whenever what's her name is confronting the alien.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's not melodic, but holy ish, every time I hear that.
Yeah.
Like,
I think the first time I heard that in the film, I thought it was like a sound. I thought it was the alien call or something. I thought it was sound design, and then it comes after so many times after. I was like, oh, this is actually score. Interesting, But I remember it.
It's memorable.
That's something else like that we had to in this discussion that was challenging for a lot of people. Was trying to distance what you liked and what you disliked from a score as to what you remember from a score.
Well, like I said, I didn't like Dunkirk, but I remembered the score and the sound design. So
any scores that you really liked or disliked, but you still found memorable, Dallin?
Gosh, that's a hard question. That I disliked that I still remember?
Yeah.
Come back to me on that one.
Okay. One that springs to mind for me was Us, the score for Us, Jordan Peele's Us.
See, I loved that score.
I liked the music, but it really stuck out to me from the film. Like, it almost took me out of the film in several respects, and I remembered that aspect of the score. I remember being like, this music is so interesting, but like so viscerally separated me from the film.
I think that's valid because...
And I didn't like it for that reason.
Right. The score is... Most of the score in the context of the movie is kind of antithetical to what's happening in the movie, because the movie itself can't decide whether it wants to be a horror movie or a comedy movie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And then you have the score, which is very sinister sounding most of the time.
Oh, gosh. There's the cue where, spoiler alert, one of the others has just... is there going to be a spoiler alert on this? I don't...
Us has been out for a
Us
long
has been
time. I
out
think
for-
that's...
It's been long.
it's
All
fine.
right, so the token white family, after they're killed...
That was one of my favorite scenes in the movie,
Right?
actually.
There's the part where her little mirror of herself was upstairs looking into her mirror, doing her hair, and you hear this score that's very classic. I'd like 50s, 40s, classic sounding.
Bernard Herrmann type stuff.
A very Herman sounding score. And then he twists it a little bit, so it's very like classic sounding. And then suddenly he closes the interval to like a minor second. And he does the same thing, and... Well, I can't sing it to you. That was very memorable, like you were saying. It was a cool little trick he did to turn it sinister all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's interesting about what you say about like I can't recall what it is, but I remember it. Like for me, Black Klansman had such like you're talking about melody-driven films. I remember walking out of that movie theater humming the tune
We all
from that
were.
film. Yeah, it was fantastic. I don't remember what it was now, but I had a very memorable melody, and it was used so
guitar
well.
riff.
Yeah, it's very good. Another, we kind of hopped around it, but do you think instrumentation, is there any sort of films where instrumentation of the score is memorable, just from a purely like, wow, I've never heard that instrument or something like that? Or
I think that's something that can, right off the bat, make it memorable. You're like, oh, because you walk into some films expecting an orchestra, and then the score for Us, which is like taiko drums and chorus and almost no orchestral instruments. And so, no, but instrumentation definitely.
Yeah, there was the Anne Hathaway one that I think it's called The Hustle.
The Hustle. Yeah, with Rebel Wilson.
Yeah, that actually had a score where just the instrumentation itself made me remember it.
Was it like a
It was
spy score, or like
no,
jazz?
it was like all like very French Riviera kind of score, you know, as lots of accordion, like solo violin, clarinet. And I remember, I mean, it was a small movie, and the composer, I don't remember her name, sadly. But she had, you know, she's fairly limited work. And actually, this film had a very small music side, almost like a chamber orchestra, a chamber little group, maybe 12 people. It was so small that they actually listed all the players in the credits by instrument. They're like the accordion player, I mean,
they're going
some
to list
have like
every
100
person that animated. Let's get every performer.
Yeah, but that was actually something that stuck with me. That movie, I was like, wow, they did so much with so little. Actually, Carter Burwell's films, the composer who came visit NYU last year, he does that a lot. Very small chamber groups that makes me remember it.
Alexander Desplat.
Okay,
That's that. I mean, Shape of Water for one, including the whistle with a very small orchestra was genius.
On the instrumentation discussion, that score.
That's what we're still on, right?
Yeah.
Haven't been out of
5 conversations behind us.
And then I can't think of the name of it because people are going to totally judge me because it did very well. It's the hotel one.
Hotel Mumbai?
Grand Budapest.
Budapest.
That's another one that it used that picked string, almost like
Desplat,
a strum. Yeah, it's him as well. I'm just saying, he had a very interesting orchestra that created an interesting sound, and I remember the sound a lot more than I remember anything else.
And a lot of times, as a listener, like whether you're a musician or not, you may not even know what the instrument is but it'll stand out to you.
Mm-hmm. Especially for non-Western instruments, you know, you're like, oh, that sounds really cool. I don't know what instrument that is, but it sounds cool.
Extended techniques on Western instruments.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah.
What's the dog movie that he scored?
Isle of Dogs.
Isle of Dogs. It was like what, a tuba, a bass drum,
lots of
some
percussion,
opera cymbals, and
that
was all it was, and it was great.
This is another aspect that's kind of unique to film music. Obviously, concert music doesn't have this. To some degree, it's not a compositional choice. But do you think are there any films or any aspect of film music that you find memorable in terms of the spotting of the film, in terms of where the music comes in and out? Does that ever come into your mind as being memorable?
Where it's cued?
Just where cues are, maybe how much music there is. Do you ever feel like that's something you remember?
I feel like where it's cued, it has everything to do with whether it's effective and whether you remember it. Back on what I was talking about at the beginning, like where it's cued has everything to do with whether it works in the scene. Talk about a film in a minute where I think that is where it suffered, was where the music was cued. Just for example, like a score that sort of has mixed feelings about it is one of my favorites, it's Jurassic World. And I think where that cue suffers, if you go back and watch the film, is it's not cued very well. If they would have moved some cues a few seconds, it could have changed the whole thing.
That wasn't the example I was thinking of. I never had an issue with how the music was cued in that one. Are we talking about bad examples of cues or good examples?
I don't know. I feel like spotting is one of those things where I feel like you don't really notice it unless it's really bad.
Well, yeah, or if they do it on purpose.
I mean,
the film we're going to spend a lot more time talking about later with The Farewell. They did it on purpose, one, to highlight the humor of the moment, of course. It's an example of drawing your attention to the music. Because they say, hey, we need you to hear the music right now. So we're going to cue the crap out of this, smack you over the face with the first note. Like, those kind of moments I love. For me, when they're the poorly cued moments, is a lot of times they try to sneak in the music after a moment of silence, and it's clumsy, and they could have done a better job. That's where I feel like the most issues with cueing come in. I can't think of an exact example, because there's a lot of
Yes. It's kind of hard to put your thumb on it, but you know it when you see it. You know?
Jurassic was just the first one that came to mind for me.
Gotcha. One of the things that I found interesting is film music, I think, when it comes to memorability, and this kind of plays into melody. I think this is really a melody aspect, but I feel like marketing is super, super important in terms of making a melody memorable. And just for an example, for a long time, the Marvel movies, nobody knew any of the music for the Marvel movies. And now I think it's safe to say people know the Avengers theme.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And it's interesting that people now know and recognize the Avengers theme when they've started putting the Avengers theme in the trailers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it starts showing up all the time. Because, I mean, people will be like, oh, you know, why doesn't anybody write melodies like John Williams? Like, Star Wars is so recognizable. But when you think about it, like, Star Wars, like, all the trailers use the Star Wars music. So it's almost like hitting you on the head with it all the time that this is the Star Wars music. So I'm wondering what you guys think about in terms of marketing, how important that is for making something memorable.
See, this is something that kind of bugs me. There's a division in film scoring right now of people who want to pursue only trailer music. It is profitable enough that they can just write trailer music, which, don't get me wrong, I love trailer music. I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. But what can make it better and what could help the scores is or the company or the person you're using for the trailer, can they sit down and talk to the composer? The composer can be like, hey, here's the theme. Here's the motive. Use this in your trailer. They can still write an incredible trailer, but then people are going to hear that music in the movie as well. So many times, which trailer was it? The third Planet of the Apes. In the very first trailer, the music was like incredible.
The recent?
Yeah, for the
It's a movie that I only remember the texture and instrumentation from. I don't remember the melody of that movie at all.
Basically a Goldsmith score.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about the score. I'm talking about the trailer composer. They got to do the trailer music for the third remake of the Planet of the Apes. Was bonkers. I loved it. I still love that music. And then I go to the movie and I was like hoping to hear it nothing. It wasn't in there at all. I was so disappointed. And I think if people work together on that side, there could be a lot of cool stuff.
I mean, that's I think the Star Wars trailers do it fantastically.
Yeah.
Every time I see a Star Wars trailer, I'm just like,
they
oh,
hit you with
Goosebumps.
Leia's theme
Yeah,
the
the
most
new
recent
one.
trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Avengers trailers obviously started doing that, and it was effective. And I promise I'm not just going to talk about Jurassic Park movies, but a testament to the...
We should have a podcast just on Jurassic Park for you.
A testament to the memorability of that theme is that with the last movie, Fallen Kingdom, every single trailer had the half-step theme on the high strings at the end.
I even think it's in that trailer for that Netflix animated one as well.
I didn't like how they did it, but it was there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it's really franchises that really benefit from this.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like individual movies should try to make an effort for it too, especially movies that have that like melody-driven score.
Well, an example, Goosebumps, the first one, a surprise hit with an incredible score from Danny Elfman. With the second Goosebumps, which I could not get through the first 20 minutes of. Anyways, for the trailer for the second Goosebumps, they used the music from Danny Elfman's score in the first one, which got me really excited about the second one because it was a recognizable score. Like if they had used that same music in the first trailer, introduced us to that quirky little triplet theme that he has going on there, it would have been awesome. I would have loved it.
Kind of bouncing off of that, what do you guys feel about franchises where the next movie or halfway through or something like that, they sort of just kind of abandon the music from their predecessor, especially when they change composers? What do you think? Because I think that definitely is harmful for the memorability of the film.
I have a lot of thoughts on this because, one, I think it's a necessary evil. I think if you have all the same music across 3 movies, it would hurt. The example that comes to mind is The Lord of the Rings. You can read, I cannot remember anybody's names right now. Shore's, thank you. With Shore's writing in that one, he has his themes. And the number of themes that he carries over movie to movie is
huge.
It's minimal.
Really?
It's the orchestration. He keeps the same texture, which is what's memorable. The only themes he carries over is like the Gondor theme you hear in the second one for a little bit, and it comes back in the third. Then you have the Fellowship theme from the first one that sneaks a little bit into the second one. like there's a whole book on the theory of his movie music, but he reuses so little of it. The one he uses the most is the Rings theme, which kind of snakes its way through all of them. But because he keeps the same texture, orchestration, the same practices, you could hear a piece of music today and be like, Lord of the Rings, I know it. And you wouldn't know what part it's from. So I think, yes, carrying over aspects of a score through the scores is important. But sometimes it can lose its effectiveness, especially if the theme from one movie is used in a completely different way in the second movie. It's almost distracting.
A good example is, I'll say first that it depends on the film.
Jurassic Park.
No, I promise I wasn't.
That's one that
but it's
helps
an example.
me, actually, though.
Yeah, it's an example. What comes to mind first is like Star Wars and the Force theme, because it's used when they're talking about the Force. It's used when the Force is being used, but they also throw the Force theme in there at random times.
Well, it's also sort of kind of like a Luke theme.
Yes,
in a
it
way.
is,
And especially in New Hope, it kind of functions like a Luke theme.
Right.
Which,
Well,
but like you said,
on that subject, like the main Star Wars theme also functions as Luke's theme at times.
Yeah.
And so it's like...
And then with that, it's weird going back and watching New Hope that you don't hear the Imperial March. It's kind of like...
Because Williams didn't even write it until Empire
that wasn't,
Strikes Back.
until Empire. And it's really, I think Star Wars is one of the better examples of sort of continuity across all of its films in terms of the score. But Rogue One, to me, that score, Giacchino, like, there's like nothing Star Wars in it.
Oh,
and when you read about it,
You're going to have the both of us disagree with you.
but when you read about it, I'm like, okay, well, props to him, because he only had like 4 weeks to do it because Alexander Desplat like came off and everything. But I wish in that movie, for example, he had used a little bit of that Star Wars magic a little bit. Like he had a theme that was like kind of his like version of the Imperial March, and it was like it just kind of felt like a cheap knockoff of the Imperial March. Like I wish he had just done the Imperial March. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and then I talk about cheap knockoffs. The first time I hear I think it's her theme, where he uses that perfect fifth and then finagles it a little bit.
Yeah.
It was a moment where I was like, oh, this is gonna be it.
It really it's a sucker punch,
But
because you're like, oh, nope.
let the record hold. I love that score.
Really? What do you remember from that score?
So
The orchestration. I love it. Sorry, go ahead.
Speaking to the reuse of themes, the standout cue from the Rogue One score is when Darth Vader lays waste to everybody.
And he kind of almost hints at the
No, it is the Empire.
He has it like buried under there. Yeah.
No, it's slowed down.
It's the same rhythm, it's same notes, everything.
Notice how that's the part you remember.
Exactly. That's what I was going to
So
say. Even
good.
more to the memorability discussion, like subliminally, people probably didn't even realize that was the Imperial March, but like it was under Darth Vader.
I saw someone like put a video on YouTube or Facebook. They're like, "Did you know this is the Imperial?" And they like sped it up, and you could hear it perfectly. And the whole time I'm like, are people really this dense? Like they didn't notice that?
Did you know in now we're getting really geeked out over the Star Wars score,
Calm
but
down.
in episode 1, Phantom Menace, like the parade scene when they're all celebrating. That's just actually the Emperor's theme in the major key. I don't know if you guys are
I
aware
didn't
of
know
that.
that.
You know the da 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 dee, da da, that like sad Empire in some minor. If you just transpose it to a major key, it's the parade. It's
I love the
music.
parade cue. I've
Which
never noticed that.
when you realize that, it kind of like you're like, because Palpatine's there and everything. It adds almost like an extra layer of depth to it.
Well, I mean, that's just Williams, though.
Yeah.
Someone was deconstructing the theme he wrote for Rey, and they're like, this is when nobody knew who her parents were, which rumors are they're gonna change that and actually give her parents. Anyways.
Who knows? We'll have to have a podcast on that when that comes out.
But like the way Williams wrote her thing, someone was like, you could tag on Vader's theme to the end of this, you could tag on Luke's, you can tag on Leia's, you can tag on anybody's, and it would fit perfectly, just to the genius of.
I was having a discussion with
Edited out.
a film music professor a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about how most of, if not all of, John Williams' music, his film music, can exist in a concert setting and feel normal. What made me think of that was you talking about how all those themes can just be tagged and spliced together. And I don't know that.
He's old school, Johnny Williams. He's,
Oh,
I mean, what is it, the X-Wing thing or the Resistance March? Just like fugue. I mean, it's just like,
Yeah.
you know, John Williams doesn't care at this point.
Scherzo for X-Men.
Yeah. Actually, kind of going on the topic of, because we're on Star Wars, and I think it's very pertinent with Star Wars. But do you think nostalgia plays into memorability of film scores?
Oh yes, 100%, and that goes back to when I was talking about like eras. Like people say that right now we're in an era of film called nostalgia.
I would agree with that.
Because
everything's a remake or a
everything's
sequel.
or a prequel or a whatever, and so like you're bringing back all these characters from these franchises that people already know, and if you don't at least hint at or hide themes people know in your score, like it's not gonna feel. It might not feel.
That
right.
to me was the difference, just for my experience, between Rogue One and Solo. Rogue One felt like new stuff, but Solo is like nostalgia turned up to like 20 because it's
That's
just
power.
I love it. I really enjoyed that, and I really remember it because I was like, oh, this is a Death Star run music. Oh yeah, you know, it's just like,
Oh yeah. Oh, that speaks to like the difference between the orchestrations between those scores and the effect that has on memorability. Because Powell's orchestrations for Solo are like John Williams. Giacchino's orchestrations for Rogue One are Michael Giacchino. So, and that's not a bad thing. I love that score, but Dallin would disagree.
I thought Solo he had kind of like flared it up a little bit.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
like he rocked it up a little bit. Everything's got like a sick drum beat behind it.
I mean, that's also Powell. Powell's known for his
Yeah.
over-the-top drums.
What do you think, Dallin, about nostalgia?
Oh,
as
I think
a
it's incredibly
memorability?
important, and I think that can be taken down to melody, or it can be taken down to like we were talking about the texture. I mean, the same thing with the Lord of the Rings movies. You hear a small cue, and suddenly you're like, oh man, I missed them. I want to watch them again. Or for me, one of my favorite scores of all time is E.T., and I was at Universal in Florida, and they still have the E.T. right there. And you walk into the show building and you hear the theme on the speakers, and I was like, I got goosebumps because it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I could hear this again. Playing off of people's nostalgia for sounds and themes, I think
Lord of the Rings, you know, you're saying about that. I think a good example of that is in The Hobbit. Whenever a couple of the Lord of the Rings themes would play, almost like foreshadowing what you know, having watched the Lord of the Rings happen, you're just like, oh yeah. When you hear like the Gondor theme or something, you're just like, oh, that's Legolas.
That speaks.
He's talking about Aragorn.
Oh yeah.
You know, and it's the nostalgia factor.
Yeah. That speaks to like memorable music's ability to create this world in a movie. Like, could you imagine if you went to a theme park and they weren't playing the music from the movies? It would feel wrong.
I mean, that's also just good cueing too.
Yeah.
That's just a good composer.
Yeah.
If you can write a theme like that.
We've kind of danced around this because you keep mentioning it, but let's address this question. Is a memorable film score an effective film score? Are they one and the same, or can they be separate?
That's a good question.
Can I hop on this one? I was thinking about this one a lot too. Oh my gosh. When it comes to film culture today and film scores, the thing that's that's distracting to me and kind of creates some of the scores that I do not like the most are scores that are all cool factors. Like, oh, this is cool, so we're going to do this. Or it's just all boring underscore, and then they do something cool. What
would you say is considered cool?
So your typical action film, right? Your typical action film where you have a riff or a motive that they just beat you over the head with over and over and over, and they put it underneath the entire thing. That kind of stuff, it's something that, okay, it was cool the first 10 seconds, but now you're just beating a dead horse. If you look at some of the way classical composers approached action scenes, it wasn't about a repetitive motive. It was about literal chaos in the music to shine on the chaos of what's happening in the film. That's why I say memorable scores are not always good, because if you're playing to the audience, they're going to like the cool stuff. Whereas a good score to me might not always be the memorable one to the crowd. I'm mixed.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, while I would like to say that every memorable score is good. It's just not true. Sometimes bad scores are effective.
Oh yeah,
But they're
for
not
sure.
memorable.
Yeah, I think a vast majority of films
That's
kind of
Marvel.
fall into yeah. For a lot of Marvel, it's just kind of not memorable scores, but they are extremely effective,
Right,
without a
and
doubt.
I think something we as composers should probably say is that, a lot goes into that. Like, it's not just the composer who is responsible for that. It's what the director wants. It's what the executives want. It's what 50 different people want.
It's a collaboration.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Just trying to defend our kind.
Oh no, yeah. This isn't the let's poop on film composers for 40 minutes.
Some of them.
But like I mentioned earlier, like Us to me is a great score, but I found it not super effective because it took me out of the film. To me, a film score shouldn't take me out of the film.
I agree.
I shouldn't be like want to close my eyes and forget about what's happening on screen and only listen to the music. As good as the music is, it has to exist in that realm of film.
Because I was enthralled by that movie and the score. Or maybe
There was
it's
a lot of
because-
there was some like vocal
like the little
textures,
chant
and
stuff,
chants and things like that. To me, kind of didn't sit with what I was seeing on
or
screen.
like the 5-minute pan off of a bunny at the beginning.
Don't get me started on those bunnies. Jordan Peele in an interview was just like, I think bunnies are freaky, so I just put them in. They hold like no significance in the movie. That's like, why are they
it's
here?
like if you interviewed Leonard Bernstein, he'd say, I think tritones are cool, so I threw them in everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the quotes that David Ludwig at this lecture seminar kind of thing says, he says, we're not in the art of making immemorable music, right? Yeah, as concert music people especially. Not to say, I don't think film music composers are wanting to make music that's not memorable. But if you had to choose between being memorable or effective, which would you be?
Memorable. I don't even have to think about it.
That's hard because once you make it in the industry a little bit and you can kind of do more of what you want to do, it's okay to be maybe a little less effective as if you place a lot of importance on writing music that you want to write. But if you're trying to get into the film music industry and you really want to make a good impression with directors, whoever, your music needs to be effective. It can't and if it's not effective, a director, 75% chance they're going to say that
memorable
sucks.
music is not effective? Asking us if you would rather be memorable or effective, you're kind of saying memorable music can't be effective.
Are they mutually
And
exclusive?
effective
No, I
music
think
cannot be
memorable music can be effective.
Right.
But if you had to choose between being effective, not memorable music, and memorable but not effective music, which would you be?
I don't know. If you listen to most of my stuff, I always have to have a melody line. I can't not have one. And then I have like my sound. I have my instruments I go to. I have my textures that I love, like kind of creating my own genre. I wouldn't say genre, my own sound.
So
Every
on
composer has their
Spotify,
own
it'll be
sound.
like hip hop, Dallin Burns.
No. It was a hip hop film music Dallin Burns.
Okay.
Right? No, but because I don't know. I don't like that question. I'm going to be honest with you. I think we should strive to write memorably effective music, and we should
In every way, yeah.
shouldn't
I think so too. I think
like
you
my
should.
idol. I'm gonna support myself here first. My idol with John Powell in film score right now. You can go back through all of his scores, and they all do both of those things. They're all very memorable. They're all very effective. I'm listening to some of his old stuff from like Chicken Run right now, and it's great. And I listen to it, and it's like, oh, I used to love this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has everything. So I'm like,
I think as composers, it's about finding the middle ground between, at times, I'm not saying every time, but like there are a lot of times we're going to have to find the middle ground because you're going to be working with somebody who doesn't want overt melodies, they just want textures, or you're going to be working with somebody
definitely the case nowadays.
who wants overt melodies and wants less of the textural type stuff. So like speaking from a composer standpoint, a lot of times you're going to just have to find the middle ground there. So,
but can you make textures
memorable?
Can you make?
Oh, I think so, definitely, yeah. I think
so
they could
I'm
do
just
both,
saying, like, don't say that one's without the other.
I don't.
They're the same mountain to climb. They're not
mutually
separate peaks.
Interesting. All right, we've beaten around the bush about this stuff, but let's actually talk about the films that we suggested talking about. So I asked Dallin and Caleb before they came here for each a film that they from this past summer, so basically like June, July, that they found to have a very memorable score and a film that they found to have a not very memorable score. So we're going to start with Caleb's choices first. So Caleb, for his memorable score, had Toy Story 4. I should say, before we talk about the score, if you want to just have a very brief discussion just about the film, what you thought about the movie, good, bad, what you like, what you didn't like.
Personally, I loved Toy Story 4, and I've heard a lot of people say it's like more of an adult story.
I would agree with that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Which is something I liked about it because it's something I can relate to. Is something
for sure.
You know,
they definitely grown up. The people making these movies have grown up with us.
The audience.
I mean, not to spoil too much about it, but a main character has to choose between staying with his friends or doing what he loves and being happy. And that's a choice I think a lot of adult people have to make. And so I loved it.
Yeah, I was pretty apprehensive when they announced that they were doing a Toy Story 4 because I thought Toy Story 3 had such a fantastic conclusion. But I thought they handled it really well. I think it's a little jarring when you watch Toy Story 4, a little bit of how much the film focuses solely on Woody. I think especially if you were to watch all four sort of in order, you'd probably be like, okay, where's Buzz in this movie?
Yeah, Buzz has like 10 lines.
Yeah, they definitely relegated pretty much everybody but Woody and the new people and Bo Peep to be like background characters, supporting characters, which was an interesting choice.
I think where they hooked me in is that I'm a sucker for prequels. I love seeing backstories to why characters make the decisions they make. And so to see why they went back and showed why Woody has been making some decisions that he's been making, which I loved. Okay,
talking about the score now. What do you remember from... Dallin also agrees that Toy Story 4 was memorable.
We do not deserve Randy Newman.
Oh. I'll second that. This world does not deserve Randy Newman. Any of the Newman brothers for that point. But
I could go without Thomas.
You heard it here, folks. Thomas Newman, if you're listening, you can get out.
I'll argue for you, Thomas Newman.
Okay,
I like you.
I'm kidding.
I love the way Randy Newman is able to write things that sound distinctly American, like the Americana, the American heartland. He nails that when it comes to using the right instruments for themes, when it comes to orchestrating things, all of that. And with Toy Story 4, he did it again right off the bat, over the little Disney logo sequence. Mm-hmm. It was like
such a great start.
Is this Randy Newman or is this Aaron Copland? Yeah. It was just perfect.
What about you, Dallin?
Oh, absolutely the same. And the thing I love about Randy Newman, and I guess it's kind of more from his era or his age of composers, their underscore, it's not a bunch of whole notes and half notes. Like, the score is moving constantly, but at the same time, like, it fits perfectly. Like, it's
never too much.
It needs.
Yeah.
It's never too much, but it's still a lot more than what we're getting in most scores today. And then the other thing that he does so well are the emotional moments. Towards the end, there's a part where a doll helps a young girl that's lost. The theater was just sniffling so much. It was annoying, but yes, it was a heartfelt moment. But go back and listen to the music. He is just tugging out your heartstrings. Oh,
I remember with Toy Story 4, I got towards the end of that movie and was like, I haven't had one of these breakdown and cry moments. And then, no spoilers. No, we're not going to spoil it. But then that happens, and I was like, "Oh boy, they got me." And part of that, I think, is Randy Newman. You know, his super effective.
We walked out of the theater after seeing Toy Story 4, and I was like, 75% of the reason I cried in that movie was Randy Newman.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also, kind of going on to that nostalgic factor, I think Toy Story 4. Musically, nostalgia is a huge aspect of why you remember everything. Because it's how long? When was Toy Story 1? Like 1995? In the 90s. So I mean, it's like almost 25 years old going on now. So you're drawing on like 25 years of and this is the same composer for every film. It's 25 years of musical history for these movies. And I think that just you play those like little two-note kind of things in the clarinet, and you're just like, I remember I was a kid with my Woody action figure. You're just like, it brings everything back to you.
Yeah, like we were talking about continuity of themes, bringing back old themes, and he does that in Toy Story 4. He brings back themes from the first movie.
Effectively, very effectively.
I'd have to rewatch them all and see if there's any sort of like musical things going on with Bo Peep. Because
Oh,
Bo Peep
yeah, I didn't
been
know
out of the franchise for a little bit. I don't really remember what her music sounds like.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see if there's some sort of musical
But
connection.
in the first Toy Story, there's a motif that's associated with Buzz wanting to fly, and when he and Woody fly,
Yeah.
and Randy Newman uses that in the fourth movie. He associates it with Woody and his emotions, and it's great.
It's a very effective score, I thought, and a very, very good movie. I'd probably say my favorite animated movie of this year.
I would say
think.
not just animated. For me, it's like one of my favorite.
Yeah, I think one of the best films of the year, easily.
Well,
I mean,
there's
for
a-
sure it's going to win animation Oscar,
Well,
unless
yeah,
something
well,
comes
it's
out.
considered for
There's a lot of
picture,
talk
too.
about it being considered for Academy Awards.
It should be.
Okay, let's move on. So this is now we're on Caleb's choice for not memorable. I feel like we're gonna have a little bit of a discussion here because we've been dancing around this film for a little bit.
Me and
But-
Caleb agree on this one.
Okay. And that is The Lion King, the 2019
Yes,
The Lion
let's
King.
clarify.
So what did you guys think of the movie?
The film itself, this is hard because going in when I go to the movies as a composer and as a musician, like music plays a huge part in whether I like the film or not. But speaking strictly to, if we were to speak strictly to just The Lion King as a film, I thought it was okay.
I think a shrug is a good way to describe
Yeah,
that
I
movie.
think it's Rotten Tomato scores like a 55. I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
sure. It's a solid D. Like I started that sentence out with. I mean, a lot of my opinion on this movie had to do with the music. So.
Actually, what I thought was interesting with this film, I'm not a huge fan of Disney doing all these live action, quote unquote, live action remakes of everything. Because
If you're gonna do it, Disney, do it well.
Yeah.
Don't screw it up.
and I thought was interesting is at least with Aladdin, which I thought Aladdin was pretty good. It wasn't amazing,
it.
but
I enjoyed
I enjoyed
Aladdin.
it as well. I thought with Aladdin, at least they made an attempt to sort of adapt the story, modernize it a little bit.
They gave new characters.
Yeah,
and
especially with
elements.
Jasmine,
Yeah,
you know.
it was great.
For a modern audience, and it was great.
Except for her song.
Yeah, and Jafar's casting, and there's
Yeah,
there's
sorry,
many
different
things,
movie,
different movie. But you know, Lion King, it's just a straight remake, you know,
Literally,
and
scene for scene.
it's scene for scene, and
Yeah.
for me, like the animation, I don't quite know what they were striving for with the animation. I understand that they were like, let's make it photorealistic, but then
Right.
I was like, okay, but this is like super boring.
But then a lot of the scenes with dialogue, you're seeing the characters from the side or from the back, and you're barely seeing their mouths, the animals' mouths.
And when you do see their face, they've just got this smug, straight face.
And
There's no
yeah, the
emotion.
The reason they did
you
those
know?
camera angles because then when you see them from the front, the animation for when they're talking is not effective.
The voice acting, I didn't think was that great from the vast majority.
Well, I
of
was
the voice acting.
50-50 on that. Some of it was good.
I
some of it
loved
bad.
some and I hated some.
I kind of wish that they had got Jeremy Irons back for Scar. They did it with Mufasa,
Jeremy
James Earl
Irons-
Jones. I really like
Yeah.
Jeremy Irons back
Jeremy
for Scar.
Irons in the original animated Lion King, like that is a performance for the ages.
It's very iconic, you know.
phenomenal.
But I thought this Scar was just kind of meh, you know. Nothing kind of like wowed me about it. But let's talk on music, as this is a music podcast.
So yeah, for real.
So this is by the illustrious Hans Zimmer, which I can already feel the hate brimming in this room. We want to try to appear unbiased if we can, but I know that's probably not possible.
Opinions are
Opinions
biased
are, yeah.
themselves.
So what did you guys think? Both of you said this was not memorable. So what are your reasonings for that?
My main argument on why it wasn't memorable for me is because I love the score for the 1994 animated version so much. And I think that they just regurgitated a bunch of that for this and didn't do it very well. And then the moments in between are not good either.
That's what got me. It was the moment, like, you have memorable moments from the original score, like the antelope moment. What are the things that chase him through that kill his dad?
Kudzus.
Yeah, those thingies. That moment.
Wow, that is
a very
not the word
memorable
I was
moment.
going for. I was like bison or something. What was it? Goose?
Well, they're
The
either
hooved animals.
know.
yeah, they're either kudzus or okapis or something. But
Yes. Like those
Our resident
moments. Sing. It was
biologist.
like
I'm this podcast's resident African biologist.
the big moments. The music was just meh. It was just like a redone version of what he had done the first time. Which
Yes.
cool, I get it. But it was the stuff in between that killed me. The way he
Yeah.
scored moments it was just, oh gosh, I was cringy. There's so many cringy moments for me. I'm not gonna get into all of them, but
I think that's where, speaking of Disney remakes, I think that's why Aladdin was a little bit better and it stands out. Is because the score, you have memorable themes for that too, but they did such a better job of
Aladdin
Menken.
Oh, he did all the scoring too?
No, I think the score is somebody else.
Oh, I thought he was just
Or maybe he did the score. I don't know.
I'll look it up.
Anyway, whoever did it, whoever produced it, arranged it, all of that, did a much better job of making it fresh, interesting, made it memorable. And with The Lion King, they did not do that.
Yeah, I remember. I think what I remember from Lion King was, you guys were talking about how there's these iconic moments from the original.
Yeah, it was okay.
That you're remembering, and I remember that from the new one. I remember sitting there remembering the old one, being like, oh, I remember this music from the original.
Remember.
Yeah. And I thought the music did an okay job as sort of looking at that older stuff with sort of fresh coat of paint, like sort of before the Be Prepared bit, it's kind of like scary music or whatever. And I was like, this kind of sounds like modern Hollywood coloring up something from 25 years ago. In terms of like the sound design, like in the music, the Hans Zimmer kind of like low string stuff that he does. That's so sound designy. So that's kind of what I remember from it, is just those nostalgic feels for the original. Yeah. And
that's what the whole movie did for me, though. It's just like,
it just made me want to go back and watch the other one because it was better.
Exactly.
Which is not necessarily a good thing. I mean,
no, it's not.
I mean, part of I guess the argument for why this movie is made is to give Lion King to a new audience, to people who didn't grow up with it.
It's to renew all their copyrights, let's be honest.
Well, I mean, for a long time, that's why Disney, the vault, when they would bring things out of the vault for like 25-year anniversary. I mean, it's just that was all it is to like make more money and to keep the copyright going. Yeah. And I'm not quite sure. This is like the modern version of that. It's like, let's just make a live action version. Like Aladdin was okay. I didn't think Lion King was that good. Mulan makes me a little bit nervous because
they're not doing any of the songs.
They're not doing any of the songs.
Again, here's the thing. Like, getting mad at Mulan for not doing the same thing that Lion King just did, it's like, do you hear yourself? Like, I want them to be fresh. I'm okay.
Yeah, well, I'm okay with
the songs where I liked them. Like, let me keep those versions. We don't, just give me a new telling is what I want.
Yeah, well, a new telling is fine.
It's risky,
but
is what it is.
I feel like part of the identity of Mulan as a film lies in the fact that it is also like a musical. Like all these classic Disney animation films are musicals. And when you strip that aspect out and you're like, we're going to tell this story without music, why don't you just make a new movie? And following a similar kind of idea, why make the connection back to this other movie and be like, it's Mulan, but half the stuff that was Mulan is not actually in this movie,
Here's a true story. Aren't they trying to be more like,
I don't think it's a true story.
Oh, okay.
It's based on,
cut that out.
I don't remember, but it might be based on some sort of folklore. But
I think it maybe is based off folklore. But
here,
I mean, imagine if Aladdin had no music and
the thing about Aladdin and the Lion
changed
King,
things dramatically.
Is that Aladdin is based on 2,000-year-old stories, and the Lion King is based on Shakespeare. So
we can't judge Mulan; it's not out. But I'm just apprehensive because it seems like a lot of the key things that made Mulan, not just the story, aren't in this. And it's like, well, why are you calling it Mulan if you're gonna?
Well, it speaks to their desire.
The Jungle Book. Hints of the songs. There were never actual. It wasn't a musical. I would never say the Jungle Book remake by Favreau was a musical, but it was wonderful. And I bet with the new Mulan, they'll probably use all the same songs and motifs and such in it. But I don't know. I'm one of the few supporters of it not being a musical.
Well, I think it speaks to
we'll just have to see.
Disney knows that the nostalgia factor is going to kick in no matter what.
Oh yeah.
For a lot of people, they're going to do what they want to do.
So she was a legendary Chinese warrior. It is treated more as a legend than a historical person.
Oh. What about Mushu?
He is not that's something that's been completely wiped from the new one. There's going to be no Mushu.
Which makes me sad.
Yeah, I mean, Mushu was just that trend of comic relief characters in the animated movie.
Well, it's the trend of Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, that's true.
But the world needs more Eddie Murphy.
I just hope that there's some sort of like spiritual guidance person or something in the film that fulfills the role of Mushu. Sure. You know, that they don't just cut it entirely. Continuing on, so now we have Dallin's picks here. Dallin had a very hard time picking something he thought was memorable. Dallin hates all film music.
No, stop it.
So Dallin suggested The Farewell, which actually came out only recently.
Yeah, a couple weeks
I agree with Dallin on this pick.
That it is
memorable.
Oh yeah, I would agree too. What did you guys think of the movie?
Oh gosh,
Loved
such
the
a good movie. Oh,
It is fantastic, I thought. One of my favorite films of this year.
It's original.
I'm so glad I caught it because it's been such a short, small release because
it'll be back for award season.
I think so for sure. Interesting.
nods.
I was thinking when I was watching this movie, will this qualify in some way for like foreign film? I mean, it's like half English, half Chinese.
Yes,
but it's
I
been
think it's-
made in America,
Yeah.
but it's shot almost like mostly in China. And I think we're going to see more and more of these kind of films. And it's like,
Does a film have to be completely...
I don't know what the rules are, but like how do you distinguish what's a foreign film? I mean, this film is like half foreign, half American, which is like what the movie's about, you know, and like the character, which makes sense. But I don't know. I think we're going to see more and more films of this, which is great. And I wonder where that's going to fit in like award season, you know. Yeah. But it's so great, I think. So fantastic. And it's not out anymore, but if you get the chance to see this movie, you should definitely see this movie. I think one of the best movies of the year.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I heard that it's going to be streaming somewhere, but I don't know.
Oh, I hope so. Well, I mean, it inevitably will. I mean, it's got like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Somewhere mainstream that
it's very fantastic. You definitely should go check it out. What did you guys think of the music for this?
I loved it.
It's very good.
I mean, like with an asterisk. This is one of those scores that is different to be different, right? It's kind of like the Desplat scores that we were talking about, where he's going for a specific type of memorability and not like a big orchestral score, which is something I loved about it. And again, with the cueing thing, this is one where when the music comes in, it's not sneaky. It slaps you upside the head saying, hey, listen to me.
Yeah.
But it was on purpose.
The spotting, this movie actually fueled why I put that spotting question in, because that's what I remember from this movie is the spotting. Absolutely. Isn't that it just kind of is like, oh, we got music now. And you're like, oh, this is really great music, but it just kind of like comes in very abruptly.
It's very stark.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like the film, to me, I was like, there's not that much music in this movie. But it's very effective when it is, but it's not wall-to-wall music. There's a lot of silence.
And a cue at the beginning of the film, that motif comes back later, and you immediately remember it. I mean, while you're still in the theater, because it's simple.
With the trailer, they used the music from the film. And like when I heard it in the movie, I was like, yes.
Well, I'm going to probably account that to the fact that this is a small movie.
Yes,
and
but it's an example.
Yeah. No. I totally agree that that's the route that it should go. And I don't know for sure, obviously, but I feel like Alex Weston, the composer for this movie, probably had some hand into the trailer, which is not always the case. I'm sure these big name composers probably don't have the time to do that, which sucks.
On the topic of the cueing, though, how you said you really liked it, he was in an interview and he said that he and the director, Lulu Wang, right? She and he were talking about the music, and the music is almost taken as its own character in this movie. A lot of times the music can be a support or it can be a character. This one's a character. And they said, in his words, she said, they wanted it to be like, oh, I thought I wrote this down. I guess I didn't. Like the bards from an old classical opera, like a Greek chorus or something. Mm-hmm. The people that walk out on the stage and tell you what's happening, but they kind of wanted it to be emotional when they do it. So it's like the really funny part is after the family has a dinner and they're arguing about American versus China and stuff, and afterwards everyone's walking out upset, but if you listen to the music, it's like this kind of almost happy march, and the choir is singing do 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 do, like, which adds to the comedy. But at the same time, he was like making a statement. No one's saying anything, but there's a lot of emotional noise right here. It's
The movie nailed
great.
musical comedy.
Oh,
I thought.
yeah.
That's kind of a tricky thing to do with music to nail comedy. But I thought this movie's music really, it made me laugh just from the music
Oh, yeah.
alone. I mean, the movie is also super funny. You should definitely watch. It's weird how that movie takes you on a complete 180 from like you're laughing your ass off to just like crying. Because
That's so true. The very end of the movie when they're driving away.
oh yeah,
Oh my gosh.
tears were shed.
Oh,
What do you
God.
think, Caleb? What do you remember from that film, from the music?
Same as Dallin, honestly. Just how stark it was. It maybe this was just me. I felt like it was mixed pretty high. Like it was. It was on the same level as the film, if not higher.
Mm-hmm. It was pretty loud in the mix, and I think that helps. Also, I mean, we know this, right? Film music a lot of the time. Get the mix down, the knob just keeps on going down, and your music you can barely audible. But this movie did such a good job of using the music, and like from an instrumentation standpoint, just very small.
It was,
Lots of like
it was
solo,
like a quartet and
very chamber.
Yeah, it was a chamber, and then they had a soloist. I thought it was a woman singing. It's actually a tenor. What was his name? Because I want to look him up. Michael Kilgore, because he needs credit, because his singing was phenomenal. I loved it.
Yeah, overall, really fantastic film.
Yeah.
And I think the score, that's an example where I think less is more.
Oh, yes.
To the max. There's
100%.
less music in the film, less instruments. It's pretty simple, but oh boy, does it work so well. And it's so memorable.
What stood out to me was like sort of what you were saying with the spotting, but like how, in my opinion, how little the music was there. How many scenes did not have music, so that then when the music came back, you're like, okay, like this means something.
Okay, let's move on now to the not memorable choice. Well, actually, we had so many options. Getting down to narrow it down here, Dallin basically said every movie from this year. But he suggested, and I feel like this is going to spark some arguments with and on the internet, all 5 people listening. Spider-Man: Far From Home.
I slightly, mostly disagree with Dallin on this one. But
Okay, we've already had our conversation.
yes, we have.
Here, okay, it stems.
Well, what did you think about this film first? What did you
Okay,
think about the
sorry.
film?
The film is unbelievably good. So good.
I think it was surprising how good this movie was coming off of Endgame.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way they can match the quality of Endgame. And I mean, this doesn't hit the same notes and same beats,
Right.
but I was like, well, this is really good for like coming off of like that, epic.
I mean, objectively, like, great film.
I liked it more than the first Spider-Man, to be honest.
Honestly, I did too.
Yeah, I'm trying to
And
think.
the
I
first
think it
Spider-Man was
improved
great.
upon most
yes, it
aspects
improved
of
upon,
the first one.
Or Marvel just has the hook so deep in her mouth. So
No, I mean,
I'm
the
getting
acting,
Marvel
kidding.
right into
the
our
story.
veins.
Yeah.
I'm like, if it's a hook, that I think it has everything there.
yeah.
Okay, so going now onto the music. You said it was not memorable down.
Yes.
What-
so the
what do you think
music,
about it?
it's first off, let me back up. I love Michael Giacchino's music. A lot of it, I should say. Some of it bugs me. It's usually his action scores. And knowing that he can write memorably effective music very well. Knowing like he has it. He knows how to do it. And then hearing how he approached the Spider-Man score, to me, it did not sound like him. It sounded like some random trailer music kid that likes loud booms and drums and nothing else. Like, I don't remember anything. I remember there are parts where the music ripped me out of the movie, especially during the action scenes. Like, there are moments where Spider-Man is doing some pretty cool stuff on the screen. Sorry. Spider-Man's doing something crazy or something crazy's happening, and then the music is just like 4-measure repeat of the same little pattern. And it's like,
Yeah, that's something I find with Giacchino a lot as a sort of copy-paste
And
loop.
that's, to that end, that's where I would say that the score for Spider-Man Far From Home suffered, was regurgitating too much of the same material.
It didn't take me out of the film, but I do I
enjoyed
do
the
remember
score, but-
not remembering any of the action music.
The thing was,
I just was like, this is
or
really
any of
generic.
the underscore, or
There was a couple
apparently
moments.
there's like a love theme that I don't remember.
I don't remember the love
assume,
theme,
like-
but I do remember the main theme and a couple of moments when that would come
so
through.
the love theme was the only part of the score that was memorable to me because the rest of it was pretty much all from the first Spider-Man film. Like, besides Mysterio, he wrote a new theme for Mysterio. Wasn't my favorite. But the love theme, maybe it's because I enjoyed it personally, that's why I remember it. But that's like the only thing I remember from the score, really.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed plate for me. I feel like I remember like the main theme, Spider-Man's theme, but part of that lies in the nostalgia and having it beat into my head already from a previous movie.
I love that theme, but
on its
make it
own
fresh.
in this film, the new material I don't remember at all, really. There was like Vulture's theme in the first one, I remember that because it was actually like the same rhythm as the Spider-Man theme. There's like I thought it worked quite well in the first one.
Yeah,
but
agree.
this one I don't remember Mysterio's theme at all, really.
So, I mean, just for the sake of conversation, like Vulture's theme is way more extensive writing of a theme. Mysterio's theme is like, it's more of a brass motif, really. It's not even really a theme. And we can get into whether motifs or themes are better or more memorable or whatever. But
well, yeah, I don't know if motifs are inherently more memorable. I guess it's really how you use them, right? I mean, like John Williams is one of these composers that's changed over the years from long themes to these tiny little cells of, if you like listen to the new Star Wars, he's like, it's 4 beats long, and I'm just going to use that the whole movie, and he does a lot with that. And yeah, that's it, Whereas you think back to, Leia's love theme, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is like 85 measures long. It just never stops. And he doesn't really write like that anymore.
it could go on for 1,000,000 measures, and I would be okay.
Yeah. So, I don't know if motifs are inherently more memorable. I feel like motivic, cellular motivic writing is becoming more the norm in film music, I would say, than long drawn-out melodies. I don't think those are really popular anymore, which is strange that people have a harder time remembering a 4-note thing than they would do this long, drawn-out melody. It's kind of strange when you think about it.
There's also the argument of the 5-note motif from Close Encounters. People will remember that in their sleep.
But listen to how it's
That's what I'm
not
saying.
used
That's
as
what
a
I'm saying.
5-note.
Yeah.
I'm like, he develops the crap
Exactly.
out of it.
Yeah.
So I guess the reason I say Spider-Man, to defend myself to one of my best friends, is the disappointment that
You don't have to
G.
defend yourself.
did not take risks or was not allowed to. I think that is killing movie music. It's the most disappointing thing in the world to me because he can do better.
And
he
I
should do better.
I think another thing to add to this conversation is that what you just described is something that could be applied to almost all of the Marvel movie scores.
They're very safe,
Yeah.
right? So they're effective, but they're not very memorable.
Exactly.
And I think like they're only just now sort of building a sort of musical continuity. We finally have an Avengers theme that people actually know. And I don't know if you guys actually saw in Endgame, if you like look in the credits, like he used a ton of the individual
Captain
character
America.
themes, Captain America, and not even his own, but like Captain Marvel, Black Panthers, Ant-Man,
Doctor Strange.
I mean, Strange is so easy. You just slap a harpsichord on a score. Like, oh, Doctor Strange.
Where's that harpsichord patch?
Yeah, but it's interesting that we're finally getting that, or because for like 10 years we didn't get that at all. We had a new theme for a character every time there's a composer change, every time there's a movie change. And so at least with Spider-Man, we didn't get like a new composer and new themes that none of us would remember.
But against that, with Spider-Man, we just got a bunch of the same that we get in every other Marvel movie.
Yeah, it was very safe.
I'm just so tired of it.
And I think my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe films are the Captain America films. And the one big problem I have with those films is that the first films, Alan Silvestri, he introduces all the themes, and then the last two, those themes don't really show up.
Yeah, well, because they changed
And they
composers.
changed composers.
Yeah.
But he could have brought the themes
Well,
back.
what would be interesting is I think Marvel's really mastered the ability to make superhero movies that are not does superhero movies. They're you know, like, this is a political thriller movie. This is a travel young kid story, or you know, they're not really just superhero movies.
This is me and my friends get together and have an acid trip.
Yeah.
Thor Ragnarok.
What movie was that?
Okay.
Why wasn't I invited?
But I feel like the scores haven't quite caught up to that. They're not like genre-ized scores yet. They're still like somewhat generic superhero scores, and I wish that they would be. I wish they would lean a little bit more into the genres that the films are trying to go into. Yeah. Like I thought Thor Ragnarok did a pretty good job of doing that, actually. Because it actually leaned into that sci-fi kind of like 80s stuff.
He's an older composer. He's from a different generation.
And he's he's not in the big Hollywood scene, you know. Sure. He actually
Thank you, Mark.
He's the name guy. I gotta have him on just to say names. He actually talked about how he saw a video on YouTube about Marvel not having very good musical continuity. And he had, that the composer, and that's prompted him in the Thor Ragnarok to using some of the older film. Like if you actually listen, like the end of the movie has the Thor 1 theme when he's sitting on the throne. That you start hearing the Asgard theme from the very first one from Patrick Doyle. And he also uses the Dark World. He actually uses Brian Tyler some of that. Who would have thought in Avengers Endgame that Thor Dark World was one of the important movies that you have had to have watched? They even like basically give you a recap of that movie in the movie because
Marvel was like
that.
Marvel was like, you thought you could just put this movie out of your mind.
Yeah, but it's interesting that he actually did that. So like he's really, because all the Thor movies had different composers, including all of his appearances in the Avengers movies with different composers giving him different music. So it was good that we saw finally a composer come in and say, I'm going to give some continuity to this character and really lean into the genre of this film. And I feel like Thor Ragnarok kind of started a trend because I don't know about you guys, but like every like sci-fi movie, and half of them are like 80s inspired. They're all like that synth sound. They're all like copying that sound that Thor Ragnarok really popularized.
What's his name?
Carter Burwell?
Yes, Burwell.
Burwell, yeah.
Someone asked him a question about being successful, and he's like, the way to be successful is to do something different. Don't be a copycat. Don't copy everyone. And that's what's killing Hollywood right now. A lot of young composers are coming in, and they're saying, hey, I can write like so-and-so. Hire me. And they say, okay, cool, we'll hire you. And they write like so-and-so. And you just get this regurgitation of styles and sounds instead of them saying, hey, I can write like so-and-so, sure, but I also, I want to do this too. I want to do that.
I think that's like a double-edged thing with composers and directors.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because I think directors are afraid to,
It's a culture
and producers,
thing that needs to be changed.
People say, I can make a movie like J.J. Abrams or Steven Spielberg, but like,
why don't you be your own Spielberg? Why don't you be your own Abrams?
Exactly.
This is like,
something new.
It's almost like Spider-Man Far From Home in here. Don't be the next Tony Stark. Be the first Peter Parker. Look at that. We wrapped the movie's theme into our discussion here.
But with composers.
With composers.
And that's why, again, Kino has such a great sound. But it wasn't in the movie. I'm just defending myself because you guys are giving me crap.
You're fine. You just won't be invited back ever again.
Seeing the peaks every time I laugh.
Actually, I think those peaks are probably from when you've been stamping on the table.
No.
When you get really passionate, you go.
Oh, probably.
Yep, there
Homer
they are.
Simpson in here.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to fix that in post.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah, so I mean, how long? We've been going for 80 minutes now. What is that? An hour and 20 minutes? We can go longer. We have those two other movies if you want, or we can wrap it up. Depends, whatever you guys want.
How long do you think your audience will be able to sit and listen?
I don't know. You 5 people listening, tell me if this was too long or too short.
I flipped this over and I got excited to talk about Midsummer.
I haven't seen that one, but I have thoughts on Godzilla.
Yeah.
Okay,
we could do sort of an honorable mention.
These are the Daniel honorable mentions that I just suggested in case we didn't have time. So we'll talk about them. But I thought one of the most memorable scores from this summer was Midsummer. Even though I personally was not a huge fan of that film, mostly I didn't like the screenplay. I thought the music really stuck with me, and it's not a melody. I don't remember any of the melodies. But the textures and the spotting in that movie, I remember.
It's not really a melodic score.
Yeah, Yeah. If I heard a happy-go-lucky melody on that movie, I'd be a little freaked out.
Yeah.
But I just thought that movie had such a memorable... So, Dallin, you haven't seen this,
No,
right?
I'll sit out.
So speaking of acid trip movies,
That's
good
this
Lord.
film.
That and the score, drives that home. There are some scenes in that movie where you, as an audience member, just feel completely helpless for these characters, and the music is stressful, and so it drives that home really well.
Yeah, there's so many scenes where the music just puts you on the edge of your seat. And it's very simply done. It's very effective, very elegantly done. It just has to do with the strings. There's a lot of like string extended technique textures and some like synth electronic elements. But it's very elegant. It's not over the top. It's very simple. And I just thought it was super effective. Super memorable.
Yeah, I'd say Midsummer is an example of like mixing and production.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Because with that score being written like it was, and I mean the way it was mixed into the film and with the film is what made it effective.
I thought the spotting in that movie also really stuck with me.
Was it spot on?
Boo.
No, there are...
Because there's a lot of times when there's no music in that movie.
there are visceral, disturbing scenes in that movie that have absolutely zero music. And it works. But there are visceral, disturbing scenes in that movie that have tons of loud music.
I think composers aren't the only people responsible for doing the spot. Whoever was the music supervisor, music editor for that film. I think in poorer hands,
there's the editor that's in charge of spotting.
Yeah.
If in poorer hands, that movie could have had a lot more music than it needed, and it would have been like music that's just telling you what you see. But I thought the fact that there's so many places where there weren't music, which is weird to say that what I remember about the music is that there wasn't music.
Sure.
But I thought that was really, really well done. And I remember it being like, wow, there's no music here, but I am literally on the edge of my seat. Yeah. And then when the music did come in, I thought it was
It's
like,
a movie about human moods and human emotions, and the music is either present and enforcing that, or it's not present and enforcing that.
I feel like we're bad for leaving Dallin out of this conversation.
No, you're good.
You should definitely go see this movie.
I
think
I
people
love
should go
horror.
see it.
I dislike the genre.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan either, and I didn't like this movie that much, but there was a lot of like individual aspects I really appreciated this movie, and I think people should just go see this movie because I think it's like an important movie to see.
It's a very artful movie.
Yeah, it's really well made. I think probably of all the movies I've seen this year, this is probably, barring maybe Farewell, I think this is probably the best made film of this year. Like on a technical level, with technical prowess, I think this is just fantastic. Like cinematography is amazing, directing is great, acting is great, score, music, sound design, and like all those aspects just are fantastic. Screenplay. I don't know. The writing, I just not a huge fan.
And Daniel and I are making eye contact because I know what he means by that.
We can't spoil. I don't want to spoil.
We can't say
Spoilers.
it. Yeah. Well, it's more than spoiler. We probably shouldn't say. But yeah.
Rated NC-17
Exactly.
podcast. Okay, so and then the movie that I said was not memorable was Godzilla, King of the Monsters, which. Okay, so I should preface this saying that the day before I saw this, I watched the first Godzilla. Again, a lot of my opinion on this movie is based on the fact that I just watched the first one. So it's a little bit of comparison.
Score aside, did you like the film?
I thought Godzilla, King of the Monsters was by far an improvement on the first film. I think of the three, I think the Monsterverse, whatever series of I think Kong is the best of the three. I think because the writing and the acting and the cast in that film, I mean, just look at who's in the movie and the story that's being told. I think the best of the three. Godzilla, the first one, the human drama, you're just like, I just don't care for this. Like when you watch
the second though.
The first one, you're like, wow, Bryan Cranston is so good. When you're watching it, I was just like almost in tears at Bryan Cranston's performance. And then he's not in the movie past the first 20 minutes. And when you're watching the first Godzilla, you're like, I forgot. It's a long movie. It's like 2.5 hours long. I forgot how boring that movie is for a large majority of its runtime. Like, Godzilla's not around. You just have to watch the human drama unfold. And you're like, oh my gosh, just fight some monsters already. And then they fight some monsters at the end. And you're like, this is awesome. And I think the second one is like, okay, people want to see monsters fighting, so we'll give them more monsters fighting. But there's still human drama. And it's the writing doesn't make sense for a lot of it. You're just like, whose side is the daughter on? And you're like, why does the mom hate everybody? And then you're like, oh, this is the bad villain.
Is this 11?
Guess they forgot about him.
And she has power over giant monsters now.
And they just kind of forgot about the like bad British villain guy that they set up like halfway through the movie. They're like, I'll just leave him for a sequel. Don't worry about it. So it's just like, from that side of things, it's still, it's better than the first one, but it's still not that good. But I thought the monster fights were awesome.
Yeah.
The cinematography.
It's
really
a
good.
Beautiful movie, great action, but get rid of the humans.
Yeah.
Or give them better parts.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, I thought.
Well, that's what I thought.
That's
Kong,
why I like Jurassic Park.
I liked Kong because the human element worked with the monster element. Like, it was one story, and like, if you look at the cast of Kong is like fantastic. There's Brie Larson, Tom Hiddleston, Samuel Jackson, what's his face? John Goodman. It's just John C. Reilly. It's just like a fantastic cast, and the story is well told. I don't know, the human drama works in that movie. And you see plenty of Kong, too. It's a good balancing act. The first Godzilla is so much human drama. You never see Godzilla. And then the second one, you're like, cool, Godzilla's in this a lot, but you're just like kind of biding your time. Every time you have to listen to humans talk, you're like, okay, in 15 minutes, I'm gonna see Godzilla tear up some city right here, and you're just like waiting for that moment. So like, that's kind of what I thought. I thought the music was not very memorable.
See, here's where I would say the movie ruined the music, because I have a lot of the cues from this saved on like my favorites playlist, because I thought it was Barry Mccreary, right? I thought he wrote some really good stuff and some really cool themes, but the movie did such a disservice to his music that on the album he has additional tracks that are dedicated to Ghidorah's theme, Godzilla's theme.
I was gonna say he
of the Monsters
themes from the classic.
I saw that in the credits that he credited the original Godzilla, which I don't recognize, but I don't know. I'm not of that age generation where the nostalgia factor kicks in for that, or I don't recognize that.
The other thing is that score was mixed super low.
It was. I noticed it too.
With how loud the action was.
Right.
Like the part where the score shone for me, which is a shiny part in the movie, is where Mothra is born.
Yeah.
And then the score into that, I was like, oh, this is what I want. But you don't get that for the rest of the movie.
I'm quite a fan of Bear McCreary. I think he's really good. And I
great.
actually, at the Atlantic Music Festival, I actually studied with somebody who taught him, which is pretty cool. Props to Bear McCreary. This is actually his first feature film. He's actually been a TV, video game guy. I don't know if you guys watch Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's been the composer on that show for
He does
and it's fantastic music on that show.
Outlander.
Yeah, he's done a ton of TV and video game, and now he's finally getting the movies, and I think he should because he's a good composer.
Oh, yeah.
And
the
music
Play, the
The
theme.
Chucky movie.
Loved it.
Did a great job.
He's a fantastic composer, and what I felt, kind of what you're saying here, is like a lot of the time when I was singing in this movie, I was like, this is really well-written music, but it's just kind of like, here's action music.
Yeah.
Here's triumphant hero music, And it's like, I love his music on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but it could have easily been, I didn't use this cue on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for when they beat the villain, I'll just throw that in. I mean, it's just kind of like you said, it's just kind of unmemorable, kind of like generic music. It's very well written. I remember listening and being like, this is good music, but it's just kind of not memorable. It was effective, it worked in the scenes within the movie. I was like, yeah, I got some.
He has a lot of nuance that you lost too in the movie with the mix. Because for Ghidorah's theme, he has this really cool chant going on underneath it. And I'm listening to this on my phone. And I'm like, where was this in the movie?
Yeah, I don't remember that at all.
This is incredible.
Actually, what's interesting is watching Godzilla and then Godzilla King of the Monsters. The first Godzilla is Alexander Desplat. And that movie, it was very interesting because there was a lot of times he kind of assigned this very traditional Japanese sound to Godzilla in terms of traditional taiko, not talking like Hans Zimmer taiko drums, but actual taiko drums. And Japanese ethnic flute kind of music. And I was like, wow, this is like, in terms of memorable instrumentation, I was like, oh, wow, this is like very not Western. And it fit with the culture of Godzilla, and it was memorable. And then sort of Peter Mccreary, I thought kind of dropped the ball on that. Like there wasn't very many like Japanese aspects to the music, which is a whole other podcast discussion of whether we should even be doing that kind of stuff, as a bunch of white guys. It's like trying to copy a culture's music. But I wish that there had done more of that, because that stuck out with me in the first Godzilla. I was like, I'm looking at this huge monster and just hearing like this Japanese flute and some taiko drums. I was like, this does not like visually match, and it works for that reason. And the second one is just like, okay, here's Godzilla, and now there's like a bunch of low brass. You just come to kind of expect it, and it doesn't stick out. It's not memorable for me. But I thought it was a good movie, and I thought the score was good, just kind of not memorable. So we're kind of done with the movies. Now I got to plug your stuff. The long process. Okay, so we'll start with Caleb. Where can people find your stuff as a film composer, or at whatever you're doing?
Caleb Burnett Music on Facebook is the best place, probably. Everything by me you can find at calebburnettmusic.com.
Any upcoming projects or projects you just finished? Anything you should look out for?
So I just finished writing the theme music for a podcast, actually, the Jurassic Outpost podcast. So I got to write some fun, got to put my spin on the John Williams Jurassic Park style.
That's fun.
And write a new theme that sort of evokes that film series. So it was a lot of fun.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Dallin, where can people find your stuff?
Oh, goodness, where do we start? Same with Caleb. My website, everything's linked from my website. So I'll spell it because I have a weird name. It's DALLIN Burns.com. So DallinBurns.com.
Yeah, and however, this podcast, I have no idea how I got to figure out distribution and that sort of stuff. But I'm sure wherever it goes, there'll be some place where I can put a text box or something in the description. I'll put links to everything for all of this as well. Got any projects you're working on right now, or upcoming, or what are you doing?
So I have 2 or 3 films that have just come out, and they're going to be circulating the film festivals. But I got previews of their score on my YouTube page. I have an album that's going to be my second album hitting Spotify in a couple of weeks. Again, with a compilation of little bits I've done for scores for films here and there. And then I've got, 2 or 3 musicals that I'm working on right now. Ooh. And here's the thing. I would never say that I am a musical composer. Never. So this has been a fun challenge, and people are either going to hate it all and think it's garbage, or it'll be really fun and different. So we'll see how it goes.
Will it be memorable? That's the question.
It's very memorable.
Will we be talking about it on this podcast
paired with some
a year
great
from
lyricists.
now? Okay. That's
book
always
will be good.
Yeah, the book is key. All right. Well, thanks for coming, guys. Thanks for hanging out and talking. And this is the end. I don't know how exactly we should end this.
We need a song to end with.
This is Daniel Farrell signing off.
Yeah, I should probably write some end title music.